to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
I am Adam Summers. You're in season 6 of Wrestling at Random, where I shudder to even say the usual thing. The theme is more wrestling than ever. The more wrestling than the more wrestling than ever we had in season 5. Some always talk all the wrestling in the randomizer and how it's pulled some mainstream stuff and some off the wall stuff. This week's show, it's the most absurd thing maybe that the randomizer has ever done. It's a territory, if you can even call it that. It's a promotion, if you can even call it that barely even exists at the time that it is producing a television show ostensibly about its existence. It is RONS Championship Wrestling. Yes, you heard that right. RONS Championship Wrestling from November 30th, 2002, featuring Ron Wright, who we have seen several times. I have fond memories of Ron Wright from Smoky Mountain and learning much more about his long and storied career. This episode of TV, though, Jeremy, is unique in these 6 years here on this podcast.
This is 2 weeks in a row, if you're listening in linear fashion, where the randomizer has pulled something weird. And here it does not disappoint. RONS Championship Wrestling.
We should say it does not disappoint by way of disappointing.
That is correct. And we will get into recapping what this show was. But before we do, you mentioned Ron Wright. He's the Ron of RONS Championship Wrestling. For those who've listened to a lot of our shows, we've talked about Ron Wright. You mentioned Smoky Mountain. He was featured in the Night of Legends show that we reviewed.
Yeah, which I believe that was over on the bonus feed, if I'm not mistaken, which really was in a lot of ways not just a celebration of the life and career of Ron Wright, who was still alive, obviously, by that point, but it was in a lot of ways a celebration of Ron Wright, and we learned a lot about him on that show that we did not otherwise know.
Let's talk a little bit more about him for those who are listening to this podcast and who are not aware. Dave Meltzer, the Wrestling Observer newsletter, writes about Ron Wright. He's remembered as the king of Kingsport. He was one of East Tennessee's greatest wrestling heels and a cultural icon in the area whose legacy spanned more than 4 decades in the squared circle. Best known for his legendary feud with Whitey Caldwell, Wright helped define an era when local wrestling wasn't just a show, it was part of the fabric of life in the Tri-Cities region. Born and raised in Kingsport, Tennessee area, Wright discovered wrestling as a teenager through the local boys club where he and Caldwell trained together. They were standout amateur wrestlers in a town without a high school wrestling program. Instead, they were honing their skills by challenging the area's pros, who trained at the club early in the week. Wright was also a talented high school football player. But his early debut in pro wrestling cost him his eligibility to play the sport after he was paid for matches while still a teenager. Wright's first professional match came under unusual circumstances. When several wrestlers were injured in a car accident, local promoters needed replacements and tapped on Wright, who was 15 years old, and Caldwell, who was 17 years old, to help fill out the card in Johnson City. By 18 years old, Wright was wrestling full-time, spending 1956 working in Maryland while playing semi-pro football. He returned to Kingsport in 1958 and started out as a referee, but his knack for riling up crowds quickly earned him a turn as a heel in the territory. Wright's career-defining rivalry with Caldwell began in 1961, ironically sparked by an accident. During a televised match for Caldwell's TV title, Ron Wright tossed his longtime friend from the ring, breaking Caldwell's shoulder and sidelining him for an entire year. The incident, though unintended, turned Wright into the region's top villain overnight and ignited a feud that would draw sold-out crowds for over a decade. Throughout the 1960s into the early 70s, Wright and Caldwell headlined countless packed houses in Kingsport, Johnston City, Bristol, and beyond. Their wild matches, brutal chain matches, famous hair versus hair bouts, and even a stipulation that cost Wright his prized horse. These were all the talk of East Tennessee.
And if you have not watched that, it was the Night of Legends show, the Smoky Mountain show that we reviewed in the bonus feed. Obviously, listen to that podcast, but watch that show because you get some, classic Smoky Mountain wrestling, just what Smoky Mountain was during that time in the mid 90s. But you really get a really cool trip down memory lane. Les Thatcher does a great job throughout that show explaining the significance of wrestling in the area, the significance of Ron Wright. He is given a Lifetime Achievement Award. I believe he brings out Whitey Caldwell's family as part of that as well. So it sort of brings to life what Jeremy is describing.
Yeah, for the local fans, the Caldwell-Wright feud became larger than life. At its peak, weekly shows drew crowds that equaled 6% of the local population.
Unbelievable. It's one of those things, again, that when people tell you that, well, it's only a couple people in the mid 80s that brought professional wrestling to the forefront in the public consciousness. You look at places like this, or you look at what Jim Crockett Promotions did in the mid 80s and the drawing 16,000 people in the Greensboro Coliseum in such a relatively small metro area. Wrestling was thriving in a lot of places.
While Wright never looked like a stereotypical wrestling star, he was smaller than many of his contemporaries. He lacked that bodybuilder physique. He compensated with unmatched ring psychology, blood-soaked brawls, and a masterful gift of gab. In an era when wrestling relied as much on grit and mic skills as on looks, Wright stood out. His matches often ended in bloodshed. He famously insisted he never bladed, but he was notorious for getting hardway juice and black eyes.
Jeez.
He was so hated that he was shot at in 3 separate occasions by angry fans. Wright balanced his wrestling career with his day job as a pressman at the Kingsport Press. He was a newspaper guy. He was so successful in wrestling that he bought his own plane and got a pilot's license to take bookings further away because he always kept his day job.
He was also he was big into go-karting, like not professional, but like competitive go-karting. As a mechanic, he built his own go-karts. He'd race them, got his kids into it as well. So like a guy that was such a wrestling icon in his area, he was not one of those guys that was just wrestling 24/7. That's all his life was.
Yeah, he had opportunities to go national, including offers from Japan, where promoters wanted him for his signature chain matches, but he turned it down to stay close to home. By the late 1960s, Wright was not just performing, but also promoting. He bought into the Kingsport promotion in 1967, took full control by 1970, running it as All-Star Wrestling. He and Caldwell expanded their feud into Knoxville, joining forces with John Canzana's promotion there and setting attendance records with tag partners like Les Thatcher, Don Wright, his real-life brother. And in the mid-1970s, Wright joined forces with Ron Fuller to form Southeastern Championship Wrestling, combining the Knoxport and Kingsport territories. But that alliance ended bitterly in 1978 when Wright, suspecting that Fuller was squeezing him out to promote, they split to promote their own shows. The promotional war that followed had Wright's group of outlaws that included Bob Orton Jr., Ron Garvin, Bob Roop, the great Malenko.
And it's a lot of guys from the, if you're listening to linear fashion, what we just watched last week.
Yes, because ultimately this feud ended up cratering the Knoxville territory. Wright lost $53,000 in the effort, and so he turned his Kentucky towns over to Angelo Poffo, who used them as the base for ICW. But Wright was no longer involved as Poffo moved that territory to Lexington, Kentucky, which we talked about in the ICW show that we just reviewed last week.
What a crazy connection. Again, the randomizer, it never does exactly what we would like it to do, but it always seems to have a mind of its own. And there are connections from week to week that you would never expect or believe. One of the things I love about this podcast is through the show, learning about guys that when I was a young wrestling fan, you only knew as old men who you were told were professional wrestlers, but they were managers or maybe even beyond being managers. They were figurehead commissioners. In the case of Ron Wright, I remember from the magazines seeing him as the wheelchair-bound heel manager in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And then years later, when I finally got to see Smoky Mountain tapes, seeing him there, and it's one of those guys, again, you were always told he was a wrestler. It always makes me think of like J.J. Dillon, who you were told was a wrestler as a kid, but you're like, this guy was a wrestler? He looks like he's 950 years old. And through this show, we learn and see so many parts of these guys and obviously talk about it, bring it to the listeners.
After Caldwell's tragic death in a 1972 car accident, Wright occasionally turned babyface, teaming with Tommy Gilbert, Nelson Royal. He captured the Southeastern Tag Team titles twice. But a 1981 auto accident ended Ron Wright's full-time in-ring career, where he severely injured his shoulder. He moved to Durham, North Carolina. He worked as a pressman again, but wrestling was never far away. In 1987, Wright returned as the heel manager for Ron Fuller's Continental Championship Wrestling, and he stayed on when David Woods took over the promotion. He famously managed the Mongolian Stomper and helped launch Doug Furness's career as a legit strongman and former University of Tennessee star. Even in his final years, Wright's talent for stirring up the crowd never dulled. In the 1990s, as we mentioned, Jim Cornette brought Ron Wright back to manage Tony, Dirty White Boy Anthony, in Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
And it was great.
Yes.
They were great together. It was one of those things that was so cool to see a few times on this podcast because, again, it was something you saw pictures of in the magazines you heard about. And like, oh, I wonder what this is. Like, it was so fun.
Yeah, he was an ornery wheelchair-bound villain whose, quote, heart problems eventually became real life when he needed a pacemaker in 2011. One of Wright's last big moments came in August of 1995 when White Boy laid down for him in Johnson City's Fire in the Mountain show, and the city declared it Ron Wright Day. Until declining health sidelined him, Wright continued making appearances. He remained a beloved fixture in East Tennessee wrestling. Though never a national household name, his influence on the region was profound. As Bo James put it, quote, he is without a doubt to this area what Jackie Fargo was to Memphis, Johnny Weaver was to the Carolinas, and Mr. Wrestling 2 was to Atlanta.
And in some ways, an even greater example of what that territory fame was like, in the sense that you were a god within whatever certain mile radius, a couple of quote unquote big cities, and you maybe get 30 minutes outside of that and no one would have any idea who you were.
Ron Wright passed away on April 21st, 2013 at the age of 76, just weeks after Nancy Caldwell, Whitey's widow, had passed away. He leaves behind box office records unlikely ever to be broken and memories cherished by 3 generations of wrestling fans who once filled armories and fairgrounds to see what Ron Wright did best.
It's crazy because part of it is just as a kid, people who are in their 50s feel like they're 150 to you.
Yes.
But I remember seeing the pictures of Ron Wright and Dirty White Boy Tony Anthony from Smoky Mountain in the Aftermags. That would have been in like 1995, maybe even earlier than that, 93, 94. He was born in 1938, so he would have been like 55, 56, 57 years old. He would basically be around the age that Dustin Rhodes is right now, still competing in AEW. And yet the idea of him in this wheelchair in Smoky Mountain, like I as a kid thought he was older than the actual age he was when he passed away some 20 years after that. It's wild.
Well, let's get into RONS Championship Wrestling. The show opens. We have a theme song. It's Midnight Flyer by a band called Kincaid with a K.
And it does not fit because the whole idea of RONS Championship Wrestling is we're bringing old school wrestling back. It's basically the charter with much, much less money and fanfare. Is 17 years later, they basically have the exact same idea that Smoky Mountain did, but the world has moved on even further 17 years later. But like that's the vibe. And here we've got music that sounds like it's straight out of like a TNA or WWE pay-per-view from like the early to mid 2000s.
Yes, like we mentioned, we're in Knoxville, Tennessee. We're told this is wrestling the way it was meant to be, old style. Let's hear the intro clip for RONS Championship Wrestling.
It's time to sit down in your house. RONS Championship Wrestling is coming at you. Wrestling the way it was meant to be, old style. Now your host for RONS Championship Wrestling, Ron Wright and Terry Landell.
Ron Wright and Terry Landell are our hosts, and they're at a table, like a desk here.
They're at a desk is being. They're at a table.
They're at a table.
This is the most local, like public access television studio, quote unquote, setup you've ever seen for a wrestling show. It's just wild. Like the big open for the show. In the open, they have an address, a physical address where you can write to RONS Championship Wrestling in the year 2002. This is just crazy that this is a thing. Like the entire time they're on the screen at the studio desk, there's either a phone number that you can call or an address you can write to.
In 2002.
In 2002 AD. This is insane.
And to be clear, this opening montage video theme song here included wrestling clips. There were wrestlers doing wrestling. This will be important to note for later.
It will also be important to note for later. There were wrestlers. Yes, there are clips from like the 70s that you can barely see what's happening, but there are what appear to be modern professional wrestling clips that look like they are filmed in like a high school gym, wrestlers doing wrestling. So
that's what I expected to see on the show. 100%.
I expected, based off of what I've seen just pop up on YouTube when a random RONS Championship Wrestling episode will pop up. Boy, what does that say about my algorithm that it does? But my assumption was this would be a studio show with a mix of archival footage and new, quote unquote, modern 2001, 2002 professional wrestling. Very indie, but still modern professional wrestling. That's what I thought we were in for.
Me too, especially because they start by plugging the big show coming up December 14th.
Yes.
Christmas for the Kids show. So we're like 2 weeks away from this show.
They plug 3 different shows all taking place before the end of the calendar year. And we're at November 30th. So like it feels like there's a loop in place.
So yeah, I'm ready for some wrestling. We're told that Ron brought in some tapes from 1976, and I'm like, oh, okay. Like, my wrestling at random ears are twitching here. I'm listening. I'm like, Ron, this is the show that I want to see.
Yes.
I'm in for a show where Ron Wright brings in old tapes and he sits down and tells us stories as we watch old wrestling, I'm here. If this is the show I'm in.
Yeah, I could deal with that. I feel like we've certainly gotten worse. I did love also that the first thing we hear after the open is Ron Wright say, "It's time to sit down in your house. Ron's Wrestling is coming at you."
So we cut to one of these old tapes, and we see. So this is an old tape.
Well,
and
it's an old tape that is roughly identified as either 1976 or 1977. Ron admits to us that he can't remember.
And it is like a VCR quality tape, dub of a dub tape here.
This is like when you would have the misfortune of buying something from before we all knew what they were from RF Video. And you thought, oh, this is gonna be watchable. And then you get some like best of count from Japan. It was like 8th generation copies that you were more watching tracking lines than you were professional wrestling.
So we get to see this old video. We see the Mongolian Stomper. We see some highlights of him. He's managed by Gorgeous George Jr., who we've talked about before in this podcast. And we see this highlight package that includes Joe LeDuc, who we love on this podcast.
Who we've seen even into like 1988 WWF television. Remember they gave him a different name or something?
Right. Yes, they did give him a different name.
That episode of Challenge or Superstars of Wrestling that we reviewed where everyone's wearing Hockey Night in Canada jackets that aren't Hockey Night in Canada. But yeah, he has appeared. Like you would think, Joe LeDuc, that it would be a relatively tight frame of time with which we've seen him.
He was the headbanger.
The headbanger, neither Mosh nor Thrasher. He was basically just Joe LeDuc, but being called the headbanger. But we've seen him in the 60s. We've seen him in the 70s. We somehow saw him as an active professional wrestler in the mid to late, like the late 1980s WWF. And here he is getting a brick broken over his head, a cinder block.
A cinder block. This is a big concrete cinder block on his head.
In modern professional wrestling, think the cinder block that Swerve Strickland used to break over the body of one Keith Lee. It was also used in the feud with Hangman Page. That is happening here in 1977 or 1976.
Yeah, LeDuc is like on his knees and he's holding this on his head, and then the Stomper smashes this cinder block with a big hammer, and it breaks over LeDuc's head, and LeDuc is out. This takes him out.
And we see it once in like normal speed, and then we see it in slow motion, which is honestly for RONS Championship Wrestling, I find very impressive in 2002. That was a technological innovation of the very, very late 70s into early 1980s in professional wrestling, but I would not have expected that here. We then see a demonstration of the same thing happening where Gorgeous George Jr. breaks the cinder block over the Mongolian Stomper's head, but the Mongolian Stomper is not hurt at all by this.
He's fine, no effects. So this was a fun little segment. And then we get a quick ad for RONS Championship Wrestling where you can hire them for your fundraiser. They plug that they're available to do, I assume, wrestling at your fundraiser.
Or just this type of show. Who knows? I did also, just one other note on the Stomper, I did like how in this feature, which is again produced back in that time period that it happened, and they just show this here, that we hear that Mongolian Stomper has had 4 different managers. So I don't know if this was like a Bam Bam Bigelow and the WWF thing where everybody was vying to be his manager and Gorgeous George Jr. got the gig, but I enjoyed that. I also liked when this was over before we went to commercial and Ron just says, that was a good viewing.
We get more good viewing as we get an actual Stomper match this time. Gordon Soley is on commentary. I love prime Gordon Soley.
This
is
from
dulcet
Atlanta.
Tones are on my TV. Yeah.
This is from Georgia, I assume, late 70s. We also, before we go to that video, that they come back from commercial. They're Terry tells us that you can donate for the kids' toy drive, even if you don't like wrestling, which is a hilarious thing to hear on a wrestling show, much less this wrestling show. I also just love Ron Wright's vocabulary. He says he wants to make sure kids have a real good toy Christmas, which I want that as well, but it's just such an interesting way of saying it. And they say multiple times how we'll get you good, clean, family, old-time wrestling when we start running shows. And then they pitch to a clip from the guy that we just saw get a cinder block broken over his head, which seems good, clean, family, old-time wrestling, I guess.
So the Stomper is taking on Steve-O as his opponent. Steve-O with a roll-up, gets a 2. Gordon thought that might be it. He's all excited. Stomper fights back with, wait for it, stomps.
Stomps. We did have Steve-O with some fiery punches on the mat after that roll-up. Like he was fired up. The crowd, again, this Georgia crowd is small. It's a studio. There's maybe like one row of people around the ring, but they are very, very hyped for this.
Steve-O with a comeback, hits an atomic drop, makes a cover for a 0 count. An airplane spin by Steve-O, and Gordon Soley with an excellent call on this airplane spin. The Stomper's manager tries to hit the ring, but he gets hit with the legs of Steve-O. He gets hit with the legs of the Stomper while Steve-O's doing the airplane spin. Steve-O then goes for the pin, but Don Carson, who's the manager in question here,
so this is another. It's another Stomper manager. I don't know if this is one of the 4 that is referenced in that video, or if this. I get the sense this took place after 1976 or 1977, the feature that we saw. So I guess this would be a 5th manager for the Mongolian Stomper, or maybe a 6th or 7th.
Yeah, he pulls the leg of the Stomper under the bottom rope, so the ref breaks the pin at a 2 count. Steve-O goes after Don Carson, but Stomper attacks him from behind. Steve moves. Stomper accidentally hits his own manager. We get a roll-up again by Steve-O, but Carson is climbing to the middle rope, so Steve-O gives up the pin to grab Carson. He slams him off the middle rope, drop kicks all around. Steve-O, your winner by disqualification.
I was not prepared for the role that each man was in this match. When we pitched to this and the way that feature hyped up Mongolian Stomper, I thought I
was ready for a squash. Yeah,
I thought Steve-O was going to take quite the Mongolian stomping. Yeah. Instead, Steve-O gets multiple visual pins. He has this man beat, and the Mongolian Stomper is saved by his 5th manager multiple times. We go from that to like Super 8 footage. Like this looks like it was shot in like it's like this Bruder film, but professional wrestling. And the Stomper at this point is the national champion, and he's defending against some guy who is on commentary, post-production styles we always talk about on these type of shows. And there is, it's Steve-O. This is the rematch between Steve-O and Mongolian Stomper. Apparently, it was supposed to be the Stomper versus Dusty Rhodes, but the Stomper took Dusty out. So we're seeing just clips of this.
Yeah, this is also from the Omni, to be clear. So this is a big show. So we had the studio match. Yes. The rematch here is the big show at the Omni.
It's at the Omni. This is just one ringside handheld camera that, again, seems like a Super 8 camera. Like it's not an actual broadcast camera. And we get a jump cut in the middle of these highlights, and all of a sudden, Steve-O has pinned the Stomper and is the new national champion. I'm so confused.
So... yeah, we spent a lot of time building up the Stomper to quickly see him lose twice at the hands of Steve-O.
Yeah, to see him lose by DQ in a match where the only reason he didn't lose via pinfall was because of his manager's help, and then here he just loses in the highlights relatively quickly. So I guess Steve-O is going to play a role at some point in RONS Championship Wrestling. I'm not quite sure. I don't know if these were literally the only tapes that Ron found.
These were just a couple tapes. I think he just grabbed some tapes and said, what's on here? Stomper? Let's go.
Yeah, grabbed 2 tapes that each just had Stomper written on the side, and that was as much prep went into this. This ends. We go back to the studio such as it is in 2002, and Ron says, which popped me, he says, "I never cheated in my career," unlike that Don Carson. We are then told by Terry, who is very excited, to tell us, and I am very excited to hear this, but also sad that this is not one of the episodes we got, that coming soon, once they finally do their television tapings, Les Thatcher will be on the show. Les Thatcher will be the commentator. He will be the one guiding us through actual RONS Championship Wrestling television.
We love Les Thatcher, and I'm pretty sure, like, in this early 2000s time period, he was doing, like, the HWA shows, right?
Yes.
Like his
Heartland,
territory.
yeah, the other, which would become, like, the other developmental alongside OVW, but wouldn't have as long of a run in that role.
But yeah, he's going to be doing Ron Championship Wrestling TV show. So I'm like, all right, I'm here for that. And Ron says that he was the most hated, but in his golden years, he's now the most lovable. And I agree, Ron. You are awfully lovable. Ron's Championship Wrestling, not only a TV show, also a wrestling school. And Ricky Morton does from the Rock and Roll Express does a commercial about coming down and joining the school and getting trained by him.
This really is incredible. They have all the elements of a, if not successful, wrestling promotion, a wrestling promotion that exists, except for professional wrestling. They have no footage of their own to share on this show. Like this, I checked just on YouTube, like this was not the first episode of RONS Championship Wrestling. This is November 30th. Like there's like a November 9th. There are episodes before this that have even less happening than this one does. It was like a shot of adrenaline to see Ricky Morton, even 2002 Ricky Morton here, show up and yell and scream about
2002 Ricky Morton looked pretty much exactly like Ricky Morton.
He did. And then it jogged my memory of like, well, yeah, we were seeing Ricky and Robert on WCW Monday Nitro in 1996, which still is bizarre. He has a cool, just fun promo, joined the RCW school. We're also told there'll be a personality profile. And I feel like we'll be the judge of how much personality is profiled in that segment. We have a commercial telling wrestling fans to visit Economy Auto Service to get their cars repaired and tell them Ron sent you.
Love that.
We then go to a commercial. At first, I thought this was the personality profile. At first, I was confused. It's Ron standing in a sweet winter jacket that isn't starter but looks starter-esque in nature, and across from him is Brent Woods of Tennessee Bonding Company. This is, according to these two, the fastest way to get out of jail if you're from one of 3 counties. This is followed by
wait. I want to take a beat for this one because Ron is in this commercial, and he's with this guy from Tennessee Bonding Company, and the guy just looks at the camera and he goes, "Just in case you ever go to jail and you need to get bonded out." Like, yeah, I guess
a thing that happens quite often in the Kingsport greater metropolitan area.
Yeah, then we get a commercial.
This commercial, I am still troubled by this.
As a father,
as a human, but even more as a relatively recent entrant into the world of fatherhood. This commercial features a woman. She locks her car. It's clearly a hot day, by the way. She locks her car. The camera then cuts to a young child in the car. She has locked her young child in the car. Oddly enough, both her and the young child are pretty okay with the situation and are borderline happy. And then we get a graphic saying something about get a locksmith. Why is everyone so happy in this commercial? She's going to jail. The kid is most likely dead. Why are we happy?
She leaves her child in the car, in a locked car, windows rolled up in the Tennessee heat. Not a great idea because she's going to go run some errands. Like, she didn't accidentally lock her keys in the car. Like, she left the child in the car and then came back to find the car was locked and the keys were inside. And that's when the baby tells her, "It's okay. Call Ace Lock and Key. They'll help us out."
I don't think it's okay. I don't think the progression of events as described would lead to the baby being able to say it's
No.
okay, I think we would have a much different situation.
Whew.
I think that Brent Woods of Tennessee Bonding Company would probably not be able to get her out of jail.
No.
I think this would be a significant problem for everyone involved. It was a significant problem for me, the viewer, to get past and to be able to process the rest of the show, because this was just so weird. Luckily, the next thing we see to snap us out of whatever that commercial did to us is 2002 Tommy Wildfire Rich.
You missed a Planet Knoxville Auto Center
Oh,
commercial.
that's right. I did see that.
Planet Knoxville Auto Center commercial where now
I did probably
earlier
miss it because I was still struggling through what I just saw through that locksmith commercial.
Yeah, now earlier in this commercial break, Economy Auto Service, we were supposed to tell them Ron sent you. Planet Knoxville Auto Center, they say, tell them the K-Town Daddy sent you. No, I will not say those words. You should not say those words.
I feel like if you say those words, you probably will again need Brent Woods of Tennessee Bonding Company to be the fastest way to get you out of jail. This is then followed by someone who probably will at some point during his stay in RONS Championship Wrestling need Brent Woods of Tennessee Bonding Company to get him out of jail. That being a completely out of his mind 2002 vintage Wildfire Tommy Rich ranting and raving about the RONS Championship Wrestling Training School. He turns around to show something on the back of his shirt that is digitally pixelated blocked.
Crazy.
We can't see what it is. And then he has a hilarious way of explaining what seems to be an odd thing of having both Tommy Rich and Ricky Morton running your wrestling school. In kayfabe, that probably wouldn't work. However, Tommy assures us that Ricky Morton will be all the way on one side of the building training people, and Tommy Rich will be all the way on the other side of the building training other people. This was by far the best thing on this show.
Whew. And so I just watched Wildfire Tommy Rich ranting and raving about the wrestling school. And I'm going to get the bends going from this ranting Tommy Wildfire Rich to a personality profile of a guy named Sammy V.
Sammy Beach. I cannot tell who it was. I also don't know who the guy was that was interviewing him.
This guy also had negative personality.
This is incredibly low energy. Sammy Beach apparently played high school football, but then wrestling came around. He was trained by a guy named Deke Rivers, was the best I can make out. What they said it was apparently a prelim guy in Georgia and Mid-Atlantic. I've never seen him. I'm not saying he's not real. I am saying that I'm going to need either myself or someone else to do investigating because I don't fully believe he's a real person.
I feel that person was real enough to take Sammy's money, but I'm not sure that he was actually like a professional wrestler or someone who should be training wrestlers.
Yes. He was convincing enough to convince this man, who is a black hole, a void of personality, that he would in fact train him. He is asked why he became a wrestler. He said because he wanted to become a preacher. I guess that was the pipeline in Kingsport. They both
youth minister, in fact.
They both talk about bringing back the old school. The interviewer is wearing a racing hat of some sort. Why we're told this, I'm not entirely certain. He asks Sammy Beach who his first match was against. It was against JT the coal miner in his toughest match. This man's been
wrestling for 8 years, he said at one point.
And let's be clear, 8 Earth years. That's 8 times 365, maybe even 366. So there had to be at least one leap year thrown in.
So
how?
He's only being a wrestler so that he can use this as a path to become a youth minister. So he wants to be Calvin Gemstone, and somehow he's been unsuccessful at doing that for 8 years so far.
You will be shocked to know I do not know what you're referencing, what Calvin Gemstone means. That for all I know, that could be the guy being featured.
It's not for you. It's not for you. It's for some of the listeners.
Is he in the personality profile, the December 6th episode of RONS Championship Wrestling, which I'm sure also does not have any RONS Championship Wrestling on it?
He talks about his toughest match being with the Mongolian Stomper. So we got some
tells
synergy.
Me, if you're doing MMA math or common opponents, it tells me that Sammy Beach never wrestled Steve-O, because we learn, if nothing else on this show, that Steve-O is a tougher opponent than Mongolian Stomper.
This Sammy successfully showed zero personality, and that's being generous because it was a negative. You mentioned black hole. That's a perfect way to describe it.
I will say that
was awful.
I am proud of myself for staying awake through this. It feels like an accomplishment.
And then finally, we're going to get some live studio wrestling, we're told. But no, we're not. We aren't. What?
Well, they said we're going to get live studio wrestling coming up soon. He meant in a matter of weeks or months.
I got excited like now, this show.
You thought, man, after we watch the same 4 commercials for the 5th time, is we coming back? Instead, no, we come back from the break. They're shilling for people outside of Knoxville to now call the number that has been on the screen for the entire half hour to set up fundraisers for professional wrestling that they allegedly produce. We still don't have evidence that RONS Championship Wrestling itself does anything other than own a small library of tapes. They go abruptly back to the same commercials again. We come back, and Ron says, boy, we have had one good day here.
And the day is over. Not a single match to be shown here. The only person who allegedly is part of this is some guy named Sammy, who we didn't really get his name even or understand his personality.
It's not quite
this
over,
was
though.
So weird.
We hear more. This ends. We hear December 19th. Ron tells us your toy will be your admission and you will feel good in your soul. The children will be tickled to death thinking about Santa Claus. They tell us that they are going to Kentucky, to Virginia, and that, quote, this thing is going real good, unquote. I need evidence that it is going, much less that it is going good or, dare I say, well.
Favorite thing on this show for you?
Its existence is just amazing to me. And I know different areas of the country are different, that this aired on a television station in the late 2002 is just fascinating. There was something earlier that I said was the best thing on this show by far. I don't even remember. Oh no, it's without a doubt the best thing on the show is Tommy Rich's insane promo.
Yes, Tommy Rich is
for the wrestling school. I don't mind that we saw it 4 times because it meant that there was less of the other things.
Agreed. Worst thing on this show?
I would say the worst thing on this show is the randomizer picking this era, dare I say, of RONS Championship Wrestling. I want to see an actual RONS Championship Wrestling television show hosted by Les Thatcher with mats taped in front of us in a studio, or I assume like a junior high school gym. But I want to see what the actual RONS Championship Wrestling looked like. Whatever they were cooking up in their minds here between Terry Lindell and Ron Wright over the course of many weeks or months before they held actual shows. I want to know what the finished product was.
Yeah, and honorable mention, the worst thing was this personality profile where the host was bad, the guest was bad, and you promised me personality, and you stuck it immediately after Wildfire Tommy Rich having the most personality of anyone on the show.
Well, I felt like this was like, it's not often that in 2 words you get 2 lies, 2 distinct lies. They told us this was, so the first word, personality. There was no personality to be found among 2 humans on the television screen. And this was barely a profile. Considering this felt like it went like 8 minutes long, I did not learn much at all about Sammy Veach other than that he apparently is really having a rough time in this 8-year transition from being a professional wrestler to being a youth minister.
We mentioned the bonus feed where you can see us review Smoky Mountain Wrestling's Night of the Legends. That's over at our Patreon, patreon.com/wrestlingatrandom, where episode 177 over in the bonus feed. That is our recap of the Smoky Mountain Night of the Legends. You can go unlock the entire back catalog, over 220 plus episodes over there in the bonus feed. $5 unlocks the entire back catalog if you go over to your Patreon and do that. If you're an Apple Podcast subscriber, you can also click the subscribe button right there in your Apple Podcast podcatcher, and it will unlock that same, everything that's labeled in there that says bonus content. It'll unlock all of it for you in the feed you're listening to right now.
This may be more bonus feed worthy than anything we've had in the bonus feed. Like at the very least, the first whatever year or so before we had the intentionalizer tier where people were choosing, the bonus feed was just the cast off weird non-full shows or single matches that the randomizer pulled that we couldn't do in the free feed. This definitely is a piece with that.
That's right. And yeah, we this would have definitely fit in there, right? When the randomizer pulls something, the only thing that I check is this a full show?
Yes.
Like this is over a half hour long. It starts and ends. So this seems like a full show, and I don't know when we start watching it that there's going to be no wrestling on it until we get to the end.
Can't.
That's the beauty of this.
And it's one thing we refuse to do. There will never be a time where the randomizer pulls something and we say, okay, we're going to watch this. That then we get and say, no, we're not going to review that, or no, we're not going to use that review. Like if we choose it and we start the process, we will finish it to completion for better or worse.
Yeah, and if we feel that it's not appropriate for the free feed, we will stick it over in the bonus feed, like we mentioned. The first probably 50 episodes are like that, and then we really got into intentionalized picks where other patrons can choose what we watch. It's not at random like it is here at the free feed. So make sure that you give that bonus content a try here, especially as we head to the off season. At the end, season 6 is wrapping up here, so you're going to be looking for more content every single week, and over 200 plus back episodes that you haven't heard, all available, all evergreen content at patreon.com/wrestlingatrandom. Of course, interacting with the show, we appreciate everyone who subscribes to the YouTube channel. Even if you don't consume your podcast via the video form, going over to youtube.com, searching for Wrestling at Random Podcast, subscribing there, giving us likes, and sending us comments. That's a great place to interact with the show. We love it. So it's a great way to support the show. If you can't support us via the Patreon, supporting us by giving us those likes and subscribes over at the YouTube channel really helps us out. If Spotify is your podcatcher of choice, you get the audio and the video both in the same feed over at Spotify. So however you consume your podcast, the likes, subscribes helps us work the algorithm so other wrestling fans can find the show. And wrestling fans know other wrestling fans, so please continue to spread the word. Another free way that you can support the show. Follow us on all the social media platforms at Wrestle at Random. Another great way to interact with the show. If you are in this Eastern Tennessee area and have Ron Fuller memories, you have RONS Championship Wrestling memories, you know
Ron Wright's memories.
Ron Wright memories, you've been bailed out by this guy, this bondsman, send us a message on any of the social media platforms. We want to hear from you as well. So with that, we are going to wrap it up and call it a podcast. Adam, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Ron Wright.
Yes.
And yeah, I guess thank you, Randomizer. But again, Randomizer never does exactly what we want. That's the beauty of it. It has a mind of its own, and that is certainly what it did this week.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening. We'll talk to you again next time.